Naga Apparel podcast. Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the object itself.
The Ngoma Lungundu. It's been called the drum that thunders, hasn't it?
It has, yeah, and it holds profound significance within the Venda and Lemba traditions in southern Africa. Bloomhill, as the research points out, believed that no other legend in African folklore held such a deep and a mystical allure.
Mystic allure.
Yeah, as that of the Ngoma Lungundu. That description really captures the powerful aura surrounding it.
It really does paint a vivid picture. So, beyond being just a musical instrument, what role did it play, particularly for the Lemba, given their oral traditions about possibly having Israelite origin?
Well, its function in their narratives is absolutely key. The Lemba oral traditions talk about their journey from the north, moving through the Arabian Peninsula, and eventually arriving in Africa.
And in these stories, the Ngoma Lungundu served a purpose very similar to the Ark of the Covenant for the Israelites. It was like a guiding symbol for the Lemba traders as they journeyed south.
A guiding symbol, almost like a portable sacred emblem. And the source points out that both the Ark and the Ngoma Lungundu stories can be considered myth, but not in the sense of being fake, right?
Precisely. That's crucial. In scholarly terms, myth here means these prose narratives that are seen as truthful accounts of the remote past within the society that tells them.
Okay.
They're accepted on faith, often tied to religious beliefs, rituals. So while we might not have, strict historical proof for every detail, both stories hold deep cultural truth and authority for their communities. It's about a foundational story with real cultural weight.
Gotcha. That's a helpful distinction. So what did this drum that thunders actually look like physically?
Okay, so the Venda Ngoma Lungundu is described as a single-headed drum. It has a hemispherical body carved from wood, often had 4 handles. They were interlaced in pairs, sometimes with carvings between them.
4 handles?
Yeah, and the drum head was made of cow skin. And quite uniquely, it had stones inside, one or more, called bumwedi.
Stones inside the drum.
Yeah, believed to come from the stomach of a crocodile, placed right inside the drum's shell, which definitely underscores its unique sacred nature, suggests a deep connection to the natural world, maybe specific powers.
Crocodile stomach stones. Wow. That's a detail that really sticks with you. And these handles sound, well, peculiar. What were they for?
That's an intriguing question, isn't it? Kirby, the researcher mentioned, thought the handles were a bit of a puzzle.
Uh-huh.
I mean, they could have been for carrying it. It was apparently quite heavy, or maybe suspending it. But having 4, sometimes even 6, it suggests other possibilities.
Like what?
Well, interestingly, there's a connection to Arab Nakari drums, which were sometimes strapped to the backs of animals like camels.
Ah, okay.
So the handles might have served a similar function as one of those design things that makes researchers look for parallels elsewhere.
So functional, maybe decorative too, and who traditionally used the Ngoma Lungundu in Venda culture.
Well, traditionally, women and girls played most drums. But the large Ngoma Lungundu was an exception, especially in important ceremonies like the Chikona and Domba dances. Then it was usually played by a man.
Interesting.
It was also deeply connected to rain-making rituals. The chief himself might beat it during a drought. It was even called the voice of Wali, the spirit of creation.
The voice of the divine. That carries some serious weight. And it wasn't just for ceremonies and rain, was it? I think I read something about it being a war drum.
Absolutely. Historically, it served as a war drum, especially for the Lemba, who were believed to have, well, magic skills in warfare.
Magic skills?
Yeah, the tradition holds that the sound of the Ngoma Lungundu had this specific, potent effect on the enemy. Could even cause them to fall asleep.
Seriously, fall asleep.
That's the tradition. It was carried by the Lemba during conflicts. And interestingly, non-Lemba people, particularly white men, according to one account, were forbidden to touch it. Even during ceremonies, only the women carrying it were allowed contact. And it was never, ever supposed to touch the ground. They'd place it on their laps when they rested.
Wow. A truly powerful object, physically and symbolically. And what happened to it? The source mentions different stories about its disappearance.
Yeah, the traditions vary quite a bit. One account from way back, like 1770, says a fire sent by Mwali destroyed the original. But other Lemba and Venda traditions suggest the original, or maybe a replica, might still be hidden away in caves, either in Dumke Mountain in Zimbabwe or the Supansberg Mountains.
Hidden away.
Yeah. Von Siekard claimed he actually found it in Zimbabwe back in 1952. And then Van Heerden reported seeing multiple drums in a Soutpansberg cave in 59, which suggests maybe when older drums wore out, they made new ones to keep the tradition going.
So a history really wrapped in mystery and folklore. Okay, Let's dig deeper into the Lemba perspective now and this potential Middle East connection. They have that evocative saying, once we had a drum because we were a holy people.
Exactly. That saying really sums up the Lemba's deep connection to the Ngoma Lungundu and their strong sense of a unique heritage, one that potentially, traces back to ancient Israel.
Right.
Now, the precise origins are still debated. That the source points out the complexities, but their oral traditions have these really compelling narratives.
Yeah.
Elderly Lemba informants tell stories of arriving by boat from this distant place called Sena,
Seta.
located beyond a place called Fusila. They survived a huge storm, apparently, and eventually reached Africa among the Banyai before moving south.
A sea voyage from a place called Sena. That definitely makes you wonder geographically, doesn't it?
It certainly does. Mathifa offered a more specific timeline, possibly influenced by literacy, linking the Lemba migration to the destruction of Jerusalem in 586 BCE, and then a move to Yemen. He suggested they met Phoenician merchants there, set up communities at Sena and Fusila in the Arabian Peninsula, practiced their form of Judaism, before some eventually crossed to Africa around 600 BCE.
And this place, Sena, in Yemen, was that just a story or is there anything on the ground?
Well, this is what's really striking. An ancient city called Sena has actually been discovered in the eastern Hadramaut region of Yemen.
No way.
Yes. And what's more, many Lemba clan, names Haji, Hamisi, Siddiqui, Saramain, these are also common names right there in that same region.
Yeah.
So this match between their oral traditions, passed down for who knows how long, and the actual geography and culture of Hadramaut, it strongly suggests these stories are incredibly old.
That's a huge piece of the puzzle, and it connects with wider Yemenite traditions too, doesn't it? About Jewish history there.
It does. Yemenite Jewish folklore talks about their ancestors migrating from Palestine to Yemen just before the first temple was destroyed. That timeline lines up remarkably well with Mativa's account of the Lemba's departure. And there are also these persistent traditions within Yemen about Jewish communities possessing the Ark of the Covenant, even using it in warfare, and beliefs that it's now hidden in a sealed cave somewhere in Wadi Hadramaut.
So both the Lemba and these Yemenite Jewish traditions mention a connection to ancient Israel and maybe even the Ark itself. It's like finding echoes of a shared past across huge distances.
Exactly. And there's even a Yemenite tradition about a Jewish group that left for Africa centuries ago and never came back, which directly mirrors the Lemba tradition of building Sena II on the Zambezi River and a place they called Sayuna, meaning Zion.
Sayuna.
Yeah. And even the 12th century Arab geographer Al-Idrisi mentioned these locations, which adds some historical weight to these ancient migration stories.
And the Lemba believed they were guided on their journey, kind of like the Israelites with the Ark.
Yes. They believed a star guided them from Sena on the Zambezi down to Zimbabwe and further south, a star symbolizing their god, Wari, which really does resemble the Ark's role guiding the Israelites, the pillar of cloud by day, fire by night. And the sacredness of the Ngoma, don't touch it improperly, don't let it touch the ground, that directly parallels the reverence shown to the Ark.
And there were sacred things inside the Bingoma, too, like the Ark had contents.
That's right. The Ngoma held sacred objects belonging to the Fasenji, maybe an earlier Venda group, and it was the Lemba priestly family, the Buba clan, who carried it, attributed to their supposed magic skills in war.
Right, the magic skills again.
And the Ngoma's reported effect on enemies, making them powerless, and this mythical pillar of flame guarding it at night. These also echo significant parts of the Ark stories.
It's such an intricate web of beliefs and traditions, although the source does remind us the Lemba themselves might not explicitly say, our Ngoma is the Ark of the Covenant.
That's a very important nuance, yeah. The explicit connection might be more of a scholarly interpretation, looking at these striking parallels. However, Al-Idrisi's account from the 12th century, he talks about the Senzi, maybe linked to the Lemba, having the Ngoma Lungundu in the Sena area on the Zambezi. And he mentions the people of Albanese worshipping a drum called Arahim.
Arahim.
Yeah, which some scholars think could be a corruption of Elohim, the Hebrew name for God. It just adds another layer to these ancient Middle Eastern threads.
And then there's von Seykart's theory, connecting it to stories like the Kibber Nagas, pushing the timeline back even further.
Exactly. Von Seekart suggested the Lemba carry the actual concept of the Ark south, maybe influenced by narratives like the Kibber Nagast. He thought the tradition could be 700, 900 years old, maybe older. Parfit built on this, tracing the origins back to the Arabian Peninsula itself.
Truly astonishing, these cultural echoes across such vast distances. Okay, let's shift focus slightly and talk about the Ark of the Covenant in early Israel. It wasn't just a box, was it?
Not at all, no. The Ark was absolutely central for the Israelites, deeply tied to their covenant with Yahweh and that key journey through the wilderness.
Right.
Pinpointing the exact age of the Ark stories is tricky, but various traditions remember a sacred object of huge significance during their desert wandering and the later period of the Judges.
More than just a symbol, it was almost like a guarantee of God's presence.
Many scholars think initially, yes, its main significance was guaranteeing Yahweh's presence, maybe without complex rituals right away. But the Old Testament stories are full of accounts of, well, magical or miraculous events tied to it.
Like what?
Like fire coming from the Lord, a cloud resting on the mercy seat, even a voice believed to speak from between the cherubim.
A voice from the Ark? That sounds incredibly powerful, awe-inspiring, really.
Indeed, and how it was handled really underlined its sacredness. It was only supposed to be carried on the shoulders of the Kohathites, a specific Levite lineage,
Okay.
never allowed to touch the ground or be touched by anyone unauthorized. Legends even grew, saying the Ark sometimes carried its bearers, like it had its own power.
Almost like it had a will of its own.
Yeah.
And it played a big role during their travels and in battle, didn't it?
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Tradition held it, signaled when to break camp, miraculously soaring high and moving ahead, guiding their path with the cloud and fire pillars.
Right, the pillars.
And it was seen as a powerful weapon in battle, believed to ensure victory even against huge odds. The Shekinah, the divine presence itself, was believed to reside within it.
Wow.
Even the story of the Philistines capturing it, and then its miraculous return, those narratives just reinforced its reputation as this object of immense power and holiness.
So multifaceted religious, military significance. But the source also mentions different accounts of how it was built and what was inside it in the Old Testament. That suggests a complex history.
It does. Exodus describes this really ornate ark acacia wood overlaid with gold, cherubim on the cover. But Deuteronomy gives a simpler picture. Just an ordinary wooden box, no gold, no cherubim, only containing the 2 tablets of the 10 Commandments.
That's quite a difference.
It is. And these different accounts, plus the tangled traditions around the tabernacle and the later temple, make it really hard to reconstruct a definitive early history. Many scholars think the fancy Exodus description reflects a later time, when the temple was central.
So the key insight here is maybe the ark's form and contents evolved, making it more plausible that a simpler, earlier version could have been carried and adapted by migrating groups.
Exactly. The original ark might have looked quite different from the later gold-covered version we often picture.
And what about its disappearance? After it was put in Solomon's temple, it just vanishes from the record. That's still a huge mystery.
It really is. After being placed in the temple, it's just gone from the accounts of the temple's destruction by Babylon or the return from exile, which has led to tons of theories about what happened.
Like what? Any famous ones?
Oh yeah, the Keber Nagast, the Ethiopian national epic, claims Menelik, I suppose, son of Solomon and Sheba, took it to Ethiopia.
Right, I've heard that one.
Other traditions say it was hidden before the invasion, maybe by King Josiah or the prophet Jeremiah on Mount Nebo, or in various secret spots listed in texts like the Tractate of Temple Vessels or the Copper Scroll. Even some Arabic sources claim it's hidden in eastern Hadramaut.
Hadramaut again! It's like a real-life historical detective story. Oh, so many possibilities. Okay, let's circle back to our drum that thunders and really compare these parallels with the Ark.
Okay, so when we put the Ngoma Lungundu and the Ark side by side, the functional similarities are really striking. Both have supernatural powers. Both are symbols of divine presence. Both have strict rules about not touching the ground.
Right.
Both carried into battle expecting victory, and both held sacred objects inside.
But the obvious difference is the shape, isn't it? A box versus a drum.
Exactly. The Ark is always described as an Aaron, a box, a chest, a coffer, while the Ngoma, even though it held things inside, was fundamentally a drum, a ritual object meant to make sound, which leads to some really intriguing questions. Could the Ngoma be a descendant of that simpler wooden ark from Deuteronomy? Could the ark itself, maybe in an earlier form, have actually been some kind of drum?
The Ark as a drum. Now that is a thought-provoking idea, and the source does mention drumming was common in the ancient Near East.
Yes, definitely. Drums were everywhere in ancient Egypt, Babylonia, Assyria, different shapes, sizes, uses. In ancient Israel, the kof, a kind of hand drum, was common, played mostly by women actually in Israel. For religious festivals, secular parties, It shows up early in the Negev, and the Israelites adopted it in Egypt. Think of Miriam's drum after crossing the Red Sea. Some see that as a political statement, even.
So drums were definitely part of the cultural landscape, which makes the idea of a connection to a drum-like object maybe less far-fetched.
And what about this specific theory, the Ngoma being a descendant of the wooden ark?
Well, Philip Davies proposed this interesting idea that there might have been multiple arks in Israelite history, and maybe even some interchangeability between the ark and the ephod, that important priestly garment. Multiple arks?
Yeah, and he noted an interlaced pattern on the ephod, and then, remarkably, Professor Parfit actually found a Ngoma drum with a very similar interlaced pattern.
Wow.
Even Jeremiah's comment about the ark not being missed after it vanished. Some interpret that as maybe implying it was replaced by or used alongside other similar sacred objects. Professor Parfit himself became convinced that Ngoma Lungundu is a descendant of that simpler wooden ark from Deuteronomy.
Multiple arks. That really opens things up. And the source even looks at the Hebrew word for ark, aron. You mentioned aron means box or chest.
Yes. Aron primarily means chest or box. It has related words, cognates, in Akkadian and Arabic meaning similar things, including coffin. But interestingly, one possible Hebrew root for the word could relate to overcoming or laying waste.
Oh.
And another, totally distinct root is associated with making a ringing sound, which raises this fascinating possibility that the ark's name itself might have had ancient links to musical instruments or powerful sounds.
So from a basic wooden box to maybe something linked to sound and victory, it's a compelling potential evolution. And the genetic evidence backing the Lemba's Middle Eastern origins adds more weight to this whole connection, right?
Absolutely. Those genetic studies really do provide scientific support for the Lemba's own long-held oral traditions about where they came from.
Right.
So Professor Parfit proposes this scenario. Maybe a priestly guild was tasked with preserving an early form of the ark, perhaps that simpler wooden one. They transported it through the Arabian Peninsula, maybe with help from Ethiopian Jewish communities, eventually hiding it in the Hadramaut.
Hadramaut again.
Then, later, with the rise of Islam, the ark, or its descendant, the sacred concept now in the Ngoma was carried further south into Africa.
It's just an epic journey. Millennia, continents, all potentially linked to the sacred drum. So as we wrap up this deep dive, we've looked at these incredible parallels, the potential connections between the Ngoma Lungundu and the Ark of the Covenant, tracing this possible path from the ancient Middle East all the way to southern Africa.
And what's truly amazing is how resilient cultural memory and tradition can be, how echoes of the distant past can be preserved, even without continuous written records.
Which brings us right back to that intriguing title you sent, Naga Apparel Podcast. Now, while it might seem totally random, what if it holds this hidden significance? Think about it again. Naga. Could it represent something ancient, powerful, wise, almost serpentine, weaving through history?
Okay.
And apparel, could that symbolize the different cultural forms, the expressions these ancient ideas take on over time, how core concepts get dressed up differently? The fact that the Lemba story points so strongly to the Middle East makes this even more intriguing. It's like finding a similar design element, a thread in two totally different pieces of apparel from different times and places.
That's a very provocative way to frame it. It really highlights how seemingly unrelated things might have these deep shared roots.
And we have to remember how complex oral traditions are, the mix of myth and history shaping identity. While we might never get definitive, absolute proof linking the Ngoma and the Ark,
Right, remains a possibility, not a certainty.
the striking similarities and these compelling narratives offer a truly fascinating, maybe even groundbreaking glimpse into ancient connections that still resonate.
And this raises a big question for you, our listener. What other seemingly random cultural things, artifacts, traditions, even, yes, podcast titles might hold echoes of these kinds of profound, long-lost connections?
Exactly. We really encourage you to think about the hidden histories, maybe in your own communities, the power of small clues, and that enduring human drive to connect with our collective past. Could a normal name, a local custom, some unusual object, could it hold a key to a much bigger, older story than we ever guessed?